whatever you are good at, whatever you are passionate at, look at that through the lens of climate and look at climate through the lens of what you do, and then go forth and conquer. Yeah, look, I think back in January, we took this step, as you mentioned, to commit to being a carbon negative company by 2030, to put in place a bunch of steps to help us achieve that, to ensure that we reduce our emissions by half, that we remove the rest of our emissions, that we achieve that reduction by moving to 100% renewable energy, completely electrifying our campus fleets, and all sorts of actions like that. And then going beyond that, to not just remove the remaining emissions associated with our business activities every year, but to try to go back in time and remove all the emissions that Microsoft's actually been associated with since it was founded in 1975. And then, of course, I call this kind of the self-awareness component to the commitment. This fund that we put in place, $1 billion climate innovation fund, which is intended to ensure that the steps that Microsoft takes on our carbon negative path, the cost and the scale and the availability of those solutions are more widely deployed around the world. And so that was in January, very different time in some respects to your earlier comments, but in other respects, no different at all. The climate crisis isn't going away. In fact, I think COVID is showing that just how tightly and how at the economic core of our society emissions actually are. At a time of unprecedented economic retraction, we see numbers on the order of 5 to 8% of emissions reduction. Right. So you see that the economic engine that's driving the emissions are the same core of the engine that's keeping the food delivered to our houses, that's keeping the electricity delivered to our houses. These are not easy challenges. But just like you guys, I would say that COVID, I think the way that our president, Brad Smith, has described it is COVID's the issue of the year. Sustainability will be the issue of the decade and beyond. We have to be able to focus on both at the same time. And in fact, if we can't, that says something very negative about our ability to actually rally around and do something meaningful on climate. All of these issues are created equal, or not created equal. All these issues come from a similar place. And if we're not capable of, acting in life different than 6-year-olds play soccer games, following the ball around all over, then we're going to have some significant problems. And so, we're not taking our eye off the ball whatsoever. It's one I use all the time as well. It's a little personal for me, not to date myself, but I was part of the smoke-free class of 2000 here in the United States, for those of you who remember that campaign. And I remember when we were graduating from high school, looking around and thinking, well, that was a failure. Right? Because simply education hadn't gotten us where we needed to go. It was really kind of the combination in my mind, as we heard Lori say, of kind of the 3 Ps of policy, of pricing, and of persuasion. And those are the 3 things that came together to really flip the switch from when I graduated from high school to when I graduated from college. Completely different landscape when it came to smoking and public health here in the United States. So, a lot of people ask me, where I find optimism, I think, in this space. And I consistently refer back to that example. Like, we did it. We've seen transformational change in short amount of time. But you got to start early, as we heard, and you got to follow the science. On the policy side, I think our perspective on this is that we need bigger, better, faster, stronger policy on climate if we are going to solve this at a societal scale. Right. We're trying to pull the biggest levers that we have available to us, right? We're going to go out there and we're going to set commitment if we provide leadership. We're going to procure things that we know the world's going to need to procure, things like carbon removal credits. We're going to invest. We're going to use our voice. Well, we're going to actually invest internally as well by deploying policy instruments like carbon taxes. We have one internally inside Microsoft. We have for many years, and we'll continue to deploy that. But we're also going to use our voice on these broader policy issues, just because, as a company, you want this to be a fair playing field, right? That Microsoft has the resources to do what it's doing is fantastic, but I think we do have to be self-aware enough to realize that not all companies are Microsoft, right? The ability to put yourself at a competitive disadvantage, at least in the short term, is not one that's afforded to many companies. And so that's really where I think policy has such a strong role to play. I would just say the other reason that I think we're really interested in, both being early movers, but then seeing policy come in behind, is that we see huge opportunity for the world. You mentioned some of the fastest growing, jobs. You mentioned, the largest transformation the world will have to undergo, this clean energy, low carbon energy transformation. All of that is a job creation engine staring us in the face. And, Microsoft can help kickstart, we can help rev that engine, but we need, the policy side to really bring it to life. I think what I would say from our side is that we don't want the world to have the impression that the private sector is going to solve this. Right? We want the world to have the impression that the private sector, and particularly our company, is willing to do everything we need to do, right? And go above and beyond. But the world's much bigger, society is much bigger, more diverse than Microsoft, right? And so we're looking for our sector to do what it needs to do, but everybody to have to kind of come along as well. And just on this kind of mishmash of rules, I think, anyone who's taken a business class would probably be nodding in agreement there of saying, extreme heterogeneity in regulatory landscapes makes for difficult business. I think a lot of times people look at kind of the sustainability work that companies are doing, and they think, it's almost some sort of like virtue signaling or something. And it's like, no, we've just got to do this. I think if you look at, for instance, renewable energy goals, I won't speak for our competitors, but I'll speak for Microsoft, is I'm really proud of the unique contractual mechanisms that we've cut to get where we are and hopefully get where we've committed to go by 2025. But at the end of the day, we don't want to be doing all of that. We just want to turn on the switch and get zero carbon energy 100% of the time entering our facilities. That's all, right? Like, if we don't have to do it, that's better, right? Like, I don't want to have to do all that. That's work that we could be putting into doing other things. We just think it's important enough for society and for our business to go and do it. And we get to bring some of the innovation culture that our company has to the mix. So I think that's all great. But, the less we have to do and the more it's just delivered as a societal service, of course, that's better for everyone, including Microsoft. The reaction was amazing. I mean, I do this as a living, so I probably have a biased, perspective on what I expected. And so, I was really surprised. And I was expecting it to be a big deal, but I was surprised at kind of how out of the woodwork customers and other businesses just came to us. And it's very interesting. Somebody used it somebody used an analogy on a conference call recently, and it stuck with me. I don't know if it'll work here, but it was kind of like admitting you're lonely, kind of in a dating world of like, oh, you're single, I'm single. Like, why didn't we talk about this before? Oh, well, you never mentioned it, I never mentioned it, and we've been having all these conversations with customers, and we weren't raising it with them as a top concern, and they weren't raising it with us as a top concern. And then we started talking about it, and that's all anybody wants. That they're like, oh, you too? And so that was just really, really, motivational for us to see that we aren't alone. We're not the only ones that care about this. And how many customers are really trying to think about this, and how many businesses are really trying to think about it, and quite frankly, to do it in a meaningful way. I think the most common commentary we got after it was twofold. One, how seriously we seem to take it. We don't put Satya, Brad, and Amy on the stage together very often.
Right.
So the senior leaders of Microsoft talking about this, I think, really got the world's attention. And then two, to your point, kind of how detailed and how tactically we're thinking about it. We weren't just saying, hey, the world needs to change, we're going to change without a plan. The president of Microsoft was delivering like a math lesson in carbon emissions. I think, that was really a special moment, I think. And it got people thinking, oh, okay, Microsoft's going to think about this in a very Microsoft way, a very, engineering, science, math sort of way, kind of our traditional geeky culture, And that really opened it up for others who maybe aren't the PR spin masters of the world, but are really good at what they do, to say, hey, maybe there's a role for us to play here. And we've just been having an incredible amount of positive conversations with customers. So. Well, yeah, I guess I would just go right back to that analogy I made around a 6-year-old soccer game. I think, the climate crisis really presents itself as one of the few things operating at the scale of the overall human experience and overall human diversity. And I mean that because it impacts every single thing that we do. And what that also means is, as a reciprocal, every single thing that we do, all of our unique skills can help. None of them individually are enough, but every single one needs to be brought to bear. And I think that so many people, I get asked this question, and everyone's like, oh, do I need to, follow your career path, or do I need to have done something? And my point is, no, whatever you are good at, whatever you are passionate at, look at that through the lens of climate, and look at climate through the lens of what you do, and then go forth and conquer. Because that's what we need everybody to actually pay attention to. We don't need the world running around the soccer ball saying, oh, it's carbon pricing, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. Right. It's all of those things. We have to do them all and all at the same time. And we're only going to do that if everybody has a deep sense of self-confidence about what they're uniquely positioned to contribute, and then they act on contributing.